Call the meeting to order. This is the November 1st meeting. We're going to note that we have two commissioners absent. Commissioner Steiner and Commissioner Oltmans are absent. The first item of business is the order of business. I'm aware of one change, and that would be an addition under tab 10, City Commission. I have a report regarding a legislator meeting. Are there any other changes to the order of business? Hearing none with that change, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
So move. And I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Second item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss or have questions about?
Mr. President, I'll move for approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
If I don't second, that means we're
done.
dragging out here?
We're done if you
Okay.
don't second.
I second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go to tab 4. And the first item we have there is a carryover from 2 weeks ago, and that is consideration to approve a reclassification request. And Mr. Kessel will have you introduce that item.
Thank you, President Johnson. Commission. This item is a reclassification of an administrative clerk to a utility billing clerk job classification. It was requested by the supervisory staff at the Baylor Building. After the initial request was made, there was an alteration in that request to realign it with a different position other than utility billing clerk. There was some confusion that resulted in that because I initially did not support the alteration in the initial submission, but I do support the change to a utility billing clerk job classification, and I would recommend approval this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Are there any questions or comments by commissioners? I did have an opportunity since the last meeting to discuss this issue with both Mr. Prowse and Mr. Kessel, and on receiving a little additional information, I too support the reclassification request.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lamb.
I also had an opportunity to visit with Mr. Prowse and feel very comfortable with the decision. Therefore, I'll make the motion. No, help me out with the type of motion we need here.
To approve the reclassification request to utility billing clerk.
Okay. I so move.
There's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to item B, which is a weight limit for trucks. This is an ordinance that we've already had first reading on, so this would be consideration to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance 1401. I would invite anyone from the public that wishes to comment regarding this ordinance to come to the podium at this time, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody from the public? There's no one from the public that wishes to comment. Are there any additional comments from city management?
Mr. President, Commissioners, you'll note in front of you, it was passed out a correction to section 23.84.140. The copy that is in your binders is the old rate schedule, the old fine schedule that we initially were using. The one handed out to you today is the new rate schedule, which is the one that is imposed under state law and that the North Dakota Department of Transportation operates under. That is the fine schedule that we would be asking for you to adopt with the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Any other comments? Any questions here or comments by commissioners?
Mr. President, and understanding the intent of this, and it's also alluded to that trucks operating within the community take the most direct route from their destination, et cetera. I do have some real concerns about the heavy trucks that we're using for construction on our residential streets. And I guess I'd just like to be able to go on the record as saying that we're not only worried about we're concerned about the type of traffic that comes from the outside of the community, but to those that were within the community, especially on those streets that are not necessarily meant for heavy loads like we have been experiencing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lamblum. Anybody else wish to comment?
I do have one question, kind of a detail thing, but in section 050, and I'm not sure who to address this question to, but in section 050, restricted use of streets and highways, we talk about the need for the city to erect signs on streets that we don't want trucks on. Are we creating a real tough situation for us from an enforcement, or not an enforcement standpoint, but a signing standpoint to do that? Can we, from a practical standpoint, can we accomplish that?
Mr. President, Commissioner Jackson, I believe the intent of Section 050 there is to create a situation where the city can restrict traffic, truck traffic on a particular route for a limited period of time, for snow emergencies or for if there's a deterioration in the road or something like that. So it would be something that, at least under that section, would be a temporary restriction for truck traffic on that particular road, depending on the condition of the road at the time.
Otherwise, the designation of truck routes is really going to control the flow of truck traffic.
Correct. In general, assuming normal conditions, we'll have to
Okay.
designate truck routes and
Okay.
enforce that in that manner.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Other comments or questions? Is there a motion regarding second reading and final passage?
I'll move for the second reading and final passage of ordinance 1401.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll go to item C, which is another proposed ordinance, and this again would be the second reading and final passage. This is ordinance 1403. It has to do with combining our wastewater enterprise account with the water distribution account and calling it the water utility account. And at this time, we would ask if anybody from the public would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. If so, you can come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public that would like to comment. Mr. Kessel or Mr. Colling, any further comments by you?
President Johnson, Commission, this represents second reading, and there's been no changes since first reading, and it's simply essentially an administrative matter to allow more flexibility during the budget process.
Okay, any comments by, or questions by city commissioners here? Now, would there be a motion regarding this proposed ordinance?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the second reading of ordinance 1403.
Is there a
And I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Go to item D. This is a flood damage prevention ordinance. This too is a second reading, and it's ordinance number 1404. We'll ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. You may comment by coming to the podium, stating your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public. Mr. Kessel or Mr. Colling or Mr. Soren, anything that you'd like to add regarding this ordinance?
Mr. President, Commissioners, as you noted, this is second reading of this ordinance. There have been no substantive changes to the text of the ordinance since first reading, so it is an identical document you're looking at. I believe also passed out prior to the meeting was another copy of that ordinance that has it enacted or codified into the manner in which we put these ordinances into our city ordinance book. So that change has been made, but there are no substantive changes to the document from first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Any comments or questions then by commissioners?
I have one, Mr. President. Under .002, it refers to the flood insurance study of the City of Dickinson dated November 4th, 2010. Is that a typo since it's November 1st?
Commissioner Lamblum, no, part of the process of getting this ordinance in place is it does get enacted on November 4th. So they're asking all the cities to have these ordinances done and in place by November 4th, the date at which the flood maps become effective. And that's the date that FEMA has established as the flood study date is November 4th.
Is it proper for us to take action on something that, before the effective date, though, of the study? That's my only question. Or doesn't it make,
FEMA is asking the city to have an ordinance in place before this is enacted. So they're asking us to take action on this. So on November 4th, it is
effective?
Effective.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'll move for approval of the second reading and final passage of ordinance 1404.
Okay, we have the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, second. Other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item E is a memorandum of understanding between St. Joseph's Hospital and the City of Dickinson. Mr. Kessel, we did report on this in your absence last meeting, but we probably didn't do a very good job of reporting on it, so perhaps you can explain this to us.
Thank you, President Johnson. This MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, would be between St. Joseph's Hospital and the City of Dickinson. The 340B drug program allows the hospital to purchase drugs and other paraphernalia at a much reduced rate if this MOU is in place. What the MOU also says is that the hospital, by accepting this MOU or agreeing to it, will also serve underinsured, indigent, uninsured Medicare and Medicaid recipients. So the guarantee for the city is those customers would be served and the hospital gets a reduced rate on their medication purchases. And we just happen to have Dennis Cannon in the audience tonight, so if there's any questions specifically for the hospital, I'm sure he'd be more than able to answer them.
Okay, well, thank you for that explanation. Any comments, questions here by city commissioners?
Is there any liability or commitments on the part of the city outside of endorsing this?
Commissioner Lamblum, there is not. This is what appears to be a way to further implement conditions allowing the hospital to serve those clientele, Medicaid, Medicare, indigent, underinsured, and uninsured.
Any other comments or questions? Would there be a motion regarding this memorandum of understanding?
I'll move we approve the MOU.
I'll say.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We have a 5:30 timetable agenda item, and that's to hear a report regarding St. Joseph's Hospital by Dennis Cannon. So, Mr. Cannon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. What we'd like to do is just a little quarterly report, and I will do my best to tell you where we've been and hopefully where we're going, and do my best to answer any of the questions that you might have. We were slated to send Reed Raymond, our CEO, here, and tonight he has been asked by the North Dakota Hospital Association to represent critical access hospitals in North Dakota. So he has, he and several others are in Montana, and they are meeting with federal government people to see how small hospitals or rural hospitals will be funded in the next few years. So where he is very important, even though this is important as well, but where he's at is very important. We think he'll do an excellent job of representing us, and not only our hospital, but small hospitals in North Dakota and the people that we serve. So that's where he would be tonight. One of the things I'd like to start off with is kind of where we've been. We've been a critical access hospital now for 18 months. And in that 18 months, one of our big concerns, and the city's big concern, I think, and the people in the city was how often would we divert people and how often would we be full? In the last 18 months, we've diverted 15 people to Bismarck because we are full. So that's not very many. One is probably too many that we'd like not to, but in the last 18 months, we've diverted 15 patients. Our ER has gone from seeing 800 visits a month to last year to this year being 1,500 visits a month. And of those 1,500 visits, less than 2% are transferred out. There's a difference between being transferred and divert. Transferred means the acute care would be more than we could handle. So we would transfer those folks out. Of that 2%, most of them, again, would be because of the acute care is higher than our hospital. So if you came in with a heart attack, we do not have a cardiologist, so we would stabilize and then transfer. Of the 25 beds that we have in, for example, July, August, and September is our first 3 months of our fiscal year. The average daily census for those 3 months has been 14. Now, I was on call a couple of those weekends, and at one time we had 5 patients in the hospital. So nobody really wants to be sick in the summertime, I guess. That's the way that works. However, in October, our average daily census is 22. So that's why critical access status is so important for our hospital. So when we have 5 patients, the federal government helps us. When we have 22 or 25 patients, they take a little. So it's it evens us out. It makes us very affordable to have hospitals in small communities. Our fiscal responsibility is very important to us. In the last quarter, we were a little under 1%. Last year at this time, we were a little over 3%. The difference in those, again, would be our average daily census plus loss of surgery from general surgeons and from orthopedic surgery. We now have in place a locum orthopedic surgeon and a locum general surgeon. We are actively recruiting for 2 general surgeons and a orthopedic surgeon. So we're in hopes of bringing someone to town that will replace the people that we've lost.
Mr. Cannon, when you mentioned 1% and 3%, were you meaning that like your profits were 1% of sales or 3% of
Correct.
sales? Okay.
Correct. Thank you. We are also in the process of, we've just hired a radiologist, which has increased our volumes. Dr. Bacher is a young man who's very aggressive, very intelligent young man as far as technology is concerned. He's brought some great technology to our hospital and has shown some great leadership as far as getting information to our docs. So that's a real positive thing for us. But of all the things we want you to know is that our hospital is consistently doing well and we are consistently making a profit. That's very important to us, it's very important to the city and the people that we serve. Our personnel is, we have about 357 employees. We are currently actively recruiting 2 emergency physicians, 2 general surgeons, and an orthopedic surgeon. We're also in the process of recruiting a nurse practitioner and a physician assistant. So we have some great plans for our future. We're also in the process of trying to be a community helper or community, I don't know if leader is the right term, but as far as healthcare is concerned, we definitely want to be a part of leadership and also a part of helping. Last year, St. Joseph Hospital gave charity care back to the community and back to the people that we serve, a little over $1 million in charity care. That's not bad debt. What that is charity care. The best way to describe that would be if you come in and you need a surgery, there's paperwork to be handed in. If the paperwork is done, you qualify, we would write that off. So we think that that's bringing health care, much like the drug bill that you just passed, much like that, we think that we're being a part of the community. It's very important for us to serve the people that can't afford health care and also the people that have little or no voice. And so we hope that we're listening and we hope that we can serve those people as well. We're working closely with Chamber of Commerce, the Homeless Coalition, Southwest District Health, Area Safety Committee, Manufacturers Roundtable, to be a part of those things that we feel are important to the city, important to the people that we serve. The major concerns that we have for us and for the area is concerns of cold weather, what happens in cold weather in North Dakota. Our industry-related traumas seem to be going up. Our security, both for staff and for patients, and what we think we're trying to do is try to be proactive in all of those issues, working with the community, Chamber of Commerce, coalitions, the Southwest District Area Health, and those. So we just hope that we would be proactive in trying to see how and what we can do to be a part of that. In closing, we would especially like to thank this commission and also the the Park Board and the county for helping us complete the land acquisition. That was in little or no time did we hear from our CHI organization that if we could pull this off and within a couple of weeks we could have that done. Had it not been for this organization, the county, and city park board, I don't know that we could have done that. So thank you very much. Questions?
Just a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned one of your concerns is industry-related trauma. Could you expand on that? What did you mean by that?
Well, we have seen from last year to this year, more people in the community, more people in industry means higher traumas. Everything from car accidents to brokenness to broken bones to the trauma in our ER seems to be escalating. And so we're trying to be proactive in that and making sure that we have everything that we need at best guess to what's going to come to our door.
Thank you. What are your challenges when it comes to doctor recruitment? What are the things that you're experiencing?
Well, the doctors have an interesting situation that when they get out of school, they can just about practice anywhere they want because multiple cities, our size and smaller and or bigger, want those docs. What we find is the city and what we have to offer is as important as what it is that we need. And it might be to the doc or it might be to their spouse. So the spouse is just as important as the doc that we're trying to recruit. So I can tell you that this rec center is a real plus for us when we go to recruit. And I guarantee you that there's no recruited doc that does not go through the rec center. So that says great things for our community, says great things for who we are and what we're about, and we are a progressive community. So I think just the competition that's out there, they can go anywhere, and competition is extremely tough.
Mr. Jackson or Mr. Lamblum, any comments or questions?
I have none.
Well, Mr. Cannon, we thank you very much. We appreciate you coming before us and giving us an update on the hospital. It's great to hear that that they've turned the corner and they're making money, and so I'm assuming you're financially stable. And we have a growing community, so we want you to be very successful in recruiting those trained professionals to St. Joseph's.
And we will. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, well, we're going to go to item F, the Historic Elks Building. There was a request at the previous meeting to approve a contract extension. Mr. Kessel, is there anything you'd like to say about this?
The Historic Elks Building addendum that you have before you represents the potentially the sixth addendum in this agreement. It would extend the deadline from its current end of September deadline of 2010 to September 30th of 2011, so basically a one-year extension. Mr. Brinkman is in the audience tonight and could take questions if need be.
Okay. Mr. Brinkman, would you take a question or two?
Good evening.
I guess if we agree to extend this one more year, is that going to be enough time?
Yes, sir.
And can you give us a little update on the building right now? I know you gave us an update 2 weeks ago, but in terms of the past 2 weeks, have you had crews in there working at all?
We have. The plumbers have finished the waste lines on the second and the process of first floor. As soon as they're complete, we can finish the insulation in the bathrooms and complete the drywall on second floor. First floor is, they will finish first floor with waste and water, and then we can insulate and drywall the first floor also. We're, again, anticipating having the second floor and the first floor substantially complete right after the first of the year.
those are my questions. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lamblum, do you have any questions for Mr. Brinkman?
If I recall at your last presentation, that you said that you'd be substantially completed by April 1st. Has that changed quite a bit?
No, that is not. The first and second floor, the tenants for those floors, we want to be substantially complete right after the first of the year and move them in by April. The condos up on third floor, we wanted to also be substantially complete. I believe we said end of April, May, with a move-in for them in June of next year. And it's just selection of finishes, moving walls and picking carpet and tiles, what we're concerned about on the third floor, because they are custom units.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Anything you'd like to add that we didn't ask you about?
Well, I just, again, appreciate the city's commitment to this, and we are looking forward to completing it also. The building looks very nice inside. It's coming along substantially well. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion here by commissioners?
Mr. President, you know, I think, maybe a little review of how this relationship between the city and Mr. Brinkman even occurred is in order, and I think it goes back at least 2 city commissions, I believe, the original agreement. But I think the summary would be is that we saw this as an improvement, a development that we as a city commission thought was valuable to our community, to the residents of our community, and that's probably why the original agreement was written in the first place. Is that a fair summary?
I think so. I would just add to that you know, Mr. Brinkman at the time was the only person who would step forward to take the risk on of developing the building, and it was, in my view, quite a risk at the time, and the city's other option appeared to be just to demolish the building and use that site for something else, possibly a parking lot.
Mm-hmm. We, you know, we've seen this request several times over the last few years, and you know, it causes us some questioning, and I think we all get questions from citizens when this comes up. I find myself wondering at what point the city needs to be involved with this project anymore. Obviously, we have a contract for deed with Mr. Brinkman that, you know, we need to see that to the end. But it seems to me at some point, and I don't know that we're there yet, but at some point, I wonder if there's a need for the city to be involved anymore. I don't know that I would propose that tonight, but I think in the not too distant future, we should contemplate that. At some point, we shouldn't be approving extensions on a time frame, it seems to me. There are lessees, I assume, buyers out there who probably have a strong interest in seeing the project completed. It would seem that those people, those entities, their relationship with Mr. Brinkman should be the parties that are moving that project to completion, and perhaps should replace our interest at a certain point. So I just throw that out there. You know, I'm not sure it's tonight. I don't know that I would propose it tonight, but
Well, I think before we get to that point, the the building has to essentially be done. Or maybe in construction terms, you would say it'd be substantially complete.
Something more than what we have today.
Yeah, and the city still has, some money set aside that, I think we set it aside primarily for sidewalk and lighting improvements once the building is ready for that. And that was monies that we would have used for the cost of demolition and restoring the site if we'd have gone that direction. So I think while the city still has, in a sense, some financial interest there, I think it's proper to maintain this development agreement. But it's been slow. We've had a fire. I'm sure the Great Recession, which has really impacted the construction industry throughout the United States, has had an impact on Mr. Brinkman's business. There's been a lot to go through here. As long as he's continuing to work and make progress, I think the correct thing to do is to approve the extension. If he gets to a point where he can no longer continue to work, then that's a different matter. But as long as he's making progress, and then I'm content to approve the extension or vote for it.
I'm just wondering if the September 30th deadline is not excessive. And I think that, we might want to consider shortening that up. He made mention to the fact that he thought he could have things pretty much in order by June 1st. And I think that if we look at a April 1st benchmark as to the progress, I think that the June 1st, and cutting this thing back even a little more so, would keep this thing in more realistic terms and almost ensure that we'll have completion. I'd like to see that thing changed to September 1st, or June 1st, excuse me, for a deadline instead of September 30th.
And if we get to June 1st, Commissioner Landblum, and they're not quite complete, would you not be in favor of an extension, or would you try to take this building that may be 90-some% complete back from this developer? I mean, in practice.
No, you're talking about ethics here, and I'm not sure I'm an ethical person.
But I mean, my point would be that in a practical sense, I think if you get there and he's not quite done, it's by the.
I'm just trying to keep this from dragging itself out on a practical basis. If there's a June 1st deadline, then perhaps we'll get the concentration and get the completion of all those elements. If the first and second floors are already marginally completed at this point by the first of the year, it seems practical that the third floor could be pulled together within those first 4 or 5 months.
I suspect Mr. Brinkman has a strong financial incentive to complete this building sooner rather than later. I don't think developers make money by dragging their projects out. But Mr. Brinkman, would you like to come forward and comment regarding Mr. Landblum's suggestion?
The June date would be fine. My only concern is selection of finishes. Sometimes when you're dealing with different individuals, selection of finishes can be very time consuming. And so I don't have a problem with the June date. It's just, if there's one condo up there that doesn't have the carpet in or doesn't have the tile in, that I would ask for consideration too. But so.
And the clients that would be purchasing the condos will be making those selections and those decisions.
That is correct, and they'll have independent interior designers and people working with them that we will work with. And so we're somewhat hamstrung with, their consultants and what selections they're making also.
But the inspections would be completed, should be completed by that time.
This would be basically tenant improvements, finishes would be the things that would be left.
So if we changed it to June 30th, you're okay with that?
Yes, yes, sir.
I'll give you the extra 30 days.
Well, you should. So, okay. I think we know what to do then. Thank you.
Thank you for consideration.
So, Mr. Landblum, if you're in agreement with that, then would you be willing to move a motion that would approve this addendum with the deadline to complete construction set at June 30th rather than September 30th?
I would.
So is that a motion then?
It's a motion that we approve the addendum to the development agreement to reflect the completion date of June 30th, 2011.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Further discussion? There's no other discussion. We'll vote. Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll go back to the timetable agenda item, and we have a public hearing scheduled regarding the proposed liquor ordinance. And so at this time, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone that wishes to comment on this proposed ordinance may do so. Just step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. So.
Janie Riddle. Good evening, President and Commissioners. For the past 7 months, I've been waiting patiently for a decision that should be a no-brainer. A decision that when I brought to attention to the Commissioners that population has increased 3,500 people more, that a new liquor license can be issued. In these 7 months, I patiently sat here and watched a lot of backpedaling and a team of men that are all businessmen listening to other well-known business owners and not wanting to listen to the new entrepreneur. In the 7 months, I hear comments, all quotes from Sean Kessel, the Dickinson Press lies, just because you can do it, you should do it. And my favorite, if you can't afford a liquor license at $100,000, then you can't afford to run a business at all. Pretty bold statement, because the last one pertains to me, and let me tell you, that was an inappropriate statement coming from a city auditor. You are worried about other businesses losing their investment? What about the 7 months you are costing me not to be open? I'm against the ordinance for so many reasons. One, the first issue, this would have never came up if I didn't do the research and come to you first. Second, it shouldn't matter the past ordinances were. You guys change them all the time anyways. Why are you making this one worse than all the rest? Are you afraid of what the business owners will think of you? Are you afraid they won't do business in Dickinson? Well, we don't need people like that in our town. A liquor license is worth $2,800. We are backpedaling by waiting for the census and agreeing to do bidding process. All this is doing is wasting more time. So hopefully maybe you're thinking I'm going to give up. It's not going to happen. Speaking of trying to ruin the town of Dickinson by not going free enterprise, which is the American way, look at all the bars. And let me state one more time, I'm not a bar, I'm a nightclub. That's what I want to start. I'm not another bar, I'm something different. Look at all the bars that are for sale. The Rock, which in their advertisement in bold black letters says, liquor license included. Because of you guys, they know as business people, this is the way you're pushing me to go. And my favorite right now is the Evil Olive. After 7 months of figuring out what to do with their license, they are now for sale. I'm asking to quit wasting time and my hard-earned money and to go free enterprise and to see what the town can do. Bring new life and new people and people that will recognize Dickinson as a town giving people a chance, not a town that has their own group and decides if you don't have enough money, you can't start a business. I'd like the answer from the commissioners about the $100,000 price tag on it. Clearly, it did not come from the ordinance that y'all rewrote. The old ordinance states that the purchase of the existing license be no less than $100,000 from another party. It also stated that once the population increased by 3,500, then another license can be issued. It was also clearly stated that the amount of a liquor license in Dickinson, North Dakota is worth if you get it from the city. Jason Frederick stated he bought his from another party for $125,000. He followed what the old ordinance said, and also Jason stated he wants to protect his investment. So my question one more time is, where did the $100,000 price originate? Mr. Oldmans also says that the $100,000 goes to the public servants, as in the police, fire, EMT. I would like you to tell me of any other business that requires $100,000 debt to start doing business, excluding, of course, other bars that followed what the ordinance says. So instead of listening to other liquor establishment owners, I believe that the commissioner should listen to the entire Dickinson public to have a clear understanding of what they think and what's right for the town of Dickinson in the public's eye. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle.
Mr. Johnson, I have a question for Ms. Riddle.
Would you take a question?
In the beginning of your statement, you attributed a quote to me specifically. Could you repeat those for me, please?
The Dickinson Press is a lie. Lies. Dickinson Press lies. And if you can't afford a liquor license at $100,000, then you can't afford to run a business at all.
The first comment was not made by me. I don't know where that came from. The second comment, that is something very close to what I said, so I don't disagree with that one. But that first comment is not something that I made.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does there anybody else wish to comment?
President Johnson, is this appropriate time for me to address my issue?
Yes, it is.
Okay. President Johnson, Commissioners, Mr. Kessel, Mr. Colling, first I'd like to thank you for taking the time and opportunity to create this new catering license for us, which we requested a while back. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to do these things, and I know it's hard to accommodate and please everybody, so I appreciate you doing that. After I've had a opportunity to read...
Excuse me, we know who you are, but since you're being filmed, you have to tell
I'm
us
sorry.
your name.
I'm Janice Martin with Lady J's Catering.
Thank you.
I've had the opportunity to review the license, and I only have one concern, and that is the limitation that's put on the catering license as to 30 days of business that we can do as a bar. I have given all of you kind of a breakdown of our business, what we've done in the past year and a half, just to give you a little better understanding of our business, the catering business, and how the liquor part of it is brought into that business, okay? As you can see from my things that I addressed and gave to you, we're running 14% only of our liquor, business is liquor, okay? So that's our major, the catering business is our ultimate goal here, but we want to be able to offer the liquor if people want to do that type of thing in renting the club itself and the catering part of it. By putting a limitation on us, it is really not going to work for us in the sense that, and I've kind of given you another sheet of paper there that you can look at that states our bars and the costs of them. Okay, you can see up to date, we've done 47 bars in this year alone, up to October. But many, many of those bars are under $200. As a matter of fact, there's quite a few that are under 100. So I want to be able to give the people the opportunity, if they book an anniversary party there for just a small function, and they want to have a cash bar available for their guests, that they can do that. But if I'm limited to only 30 bars, you know, and I'm only making 98 bucks on that bar of one of those 30 bars, you can see that that's just realistically not going to work. In essence, this whole thing started as a sale thing. I would like not to be limited to the number of bars that I can have, but the quantity, the percentage of sales that it can be. I noticed that, you know, it's 50% to run a restaurant. To have the restaurant bar, you have to 50% of your sales. I noticed in the new provision that you've gone to 40%. I would very realistically be willing to go down to 25%. That's how little our bar sales are of our business. And you can see that by the papers that I've given you, that right now we're running 14% and 15%. So by limiting to us the number of bars we can have is going to eliminate the small little guys that still want a bar available for maybe their anniversary party or a retirement party or things like that, that only yield me $100 in sales or $200 in sales. So I've kind of, you know, I know all the legal ramifications have to be, and the wording has to be appropriate, Mr. Colling, but I'm just wondering if there's some way I've put down kind of a wording that might be appropriate or be able to work, you know, in that essence, not limiting me to the numbers, but more the percentages. And like I said, I'd definitely be willing to go down to 25 because I just know my sales would never reach more than that. I just want the opportunity to be able to, the people that book me as a caterer, be able to offer them a small cash bar or any type of bar if they want it within the, you know, within the club that they book there. The other thing would be, and I noticed in the last paragraph, and I think I kind of misread that at first, but now I think I understand it. It's the section 400-08270 that says that you have to have an off-site license, correct? So to say that you have to have it off premises, just double saying it, I guess, in that essence. So we're not disputing. We would definitely be willing to pay, if we cater off premise and we have to do a bar off premise, I'd be willing to pay that additional fee as well. That would be in addition to any other license that we hold. So I'd be willing to do that. My only concern is, like I said, the 30 days in the calendar year. Because as you can see, it would really limit the number of bars that I'd be able to host, even those really small bars, you know, those $98 ones or whatever, that I want to be able to make available to the, you know, the people of Dickinson if they want to rent our club. So we really, our biggest argument has always been based on the dollar value of our alcohol sales versus in our catering end of it.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight, and you're averaging a little less than 5 bars per month through the first 10 months of this year. So if this year is a typical year, if under that point number 1 where it says a qualified caterer, if instead of 30 days, if that read 60 days, and then in paragraph 3 there, if the 40% read 25%, that would probably be really close to meeting your need.
60 would probably, as you can see, we've done 47 up to end of October, and of course I've got Christmas parties coming up yet, so it would be really close
That'd
with
be
the 60.
tight.
That would be tight.
So
You
if we
know,
went-
75 or 80 I'd be more comfortable with. And, you know, every year is going to be different, of course, but it's the small ones that are putting us up above that. You can see there's many of them that were that $98, and those are those small company work things, maybe small anniversaries, you know, parties like that, that want to have a bar available, but it's not going to be a huge volume for us.
You know, the ordinance not only has to work for you, it has to work for anybody else that might be in the catering business.
Understand. Mhm.
Mr. Colling, do you have any thoughts on Ms. Martin's points here?
Mr. President, Commissioners, the numbers that you choose to use and the number of days that a caterer could sell alcohol, the percentage of dollar volume for alcohol sales, those are matters at your discretion, and there is nothing that would bind you in any way use one number over another. So in that respect, I think leave it to your discretion to decide what the proper number should be. The 30 days that I put in there in this ordinance, it's reflective of the ordinance that currently exists in Bismarck for caterers licenses. If I recall correctly, I believe their number was 25. But that number is something that is completely at your discretion, and whatever you feel is best in the situation. I think you have pretty free reign to decide those numbers.
Okay. Any questions or comments by Mr. Landblum or Mr. Jackson here?
Do we, Mr. Kessel, do we have an indication as to how many other businesses would qualify for this particular license?
There are a couple other caterers in town. I don't believe that they own buildings in the same manner that Ms. Martin does. So their catering events would be considered off-site, and they would have to then apply for the fee and pay $25 per event.
There's no limit on that?
No, there is not.
Other comments or questions?
You know, I think we talked about this before, but does a caterer need some other license? Forget the alcohol part of this. Could you start a catering business without?
Not the way I cook.
Well, I'm letting my imagination go a little bit.
Do we need a city license to be in the catering business?
No, you do not.
No. Okay. So, I mean, you could just, anybody, as long as they get the proper, I imagine.
They have to
state
follow all
license.
the health, regulations and rules, and, I mean, somebody to start up in their own home, they couldn't, because they'd have to be a qualified kitchen that is health inspected and state and
So it's a state license?
city. Mhm.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so if someone did that and they cater event and their customer wants them to serve alcohol, they can do that as long as they get the proper city permit, pay the fee.
That would fall into that off-prem.
No?
Not exactly.
Not exactly? Okay.
The only people that can sell alcohol within city limits are people who have an existing license. So if you had someone that wanted to, say an ordinary restaurant that did not have an alcohol permit, and they wanted to cater an event off-site where alcohol was available, they would have to get an existing license holder to then cater that alcohol off-site.
Oh, okay. So they would have to subcontract that out. That's the way it would be done. Okay.
You know, I can't imagine that the day-to-day would make it easy. The terminology here, day-to-day, would make it easy for the city to monitor and enforce. It seems like we have to have some kind of number. But I'm curious, the 25 must be working for you in Bismarck.
The 25 what?
Apparently Bismarck puts a limitation of 25.
No, actually in Bismarck, we lease the Bismarck Country Club, so we're under Parks and Rec. So the Country Club itself has its own license. So the city did that for us there, Bismarck, did it for the city of Bismarck, where the Country Club has its own license at the city, not a restaurant, not anything. It has its own.
It's a different
So, yeah,
situation.
yeah.
Okay.
And they're the same, too. We have our liquor license that costs us there, and then we can apply for off-site. If we cater off-site somewhere, we do an off-site license as well.
And I think the percentage number is probably more important, actually, than the number of events.
Yeah.
So to go to 75 or something, I would be fine with that.
Okay. Well, I think we'll chew on it here a little bit, but what I'm hearing is that changing the days to 70 or 75 is probably not we wouldn't object to that. As Mr. Jackson said, the percentage is probably the more important item, and I think, on first blush here, probably the lower percentage that you suggested, 25%, is a good idea. So let's see if there's any other comments, so, okay?
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I may, the percentage requirement might be something that we need to do a little bit of research on city staff with. To believe that there are a number of restaurants in town that would qualify under that percentage requirement, that have, you know, an ordinary restaurant may only have 10% of their sales in alcohol. So I'm not sure what the right percentage is, but I do think for a caterer's license, the number of days in which you can sell alcohol is going to be a key element of the statute in order to distinguish a restaurant from a caterer.
So you'd like to do a little more research before we settle in on any numbers?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Other comments? Anybody else wish to comment on this proposed ordinance?
President Johnson and Commissioners, my name is Bernie Marsh, and I don't know, I'm a little confused by that whole thing. And it's not my job to make any decision here, but at that point, Jack's gonna apply for catering, you know, which, I mean, that's fine with me, but I think there's gonna be more doors opened or loopholes found in the way that this is set up right now. I mean, if it's an on-premise event, then there should be an on-premise license. You know, instead of making another, if you're going to cater an event off-premise, then that's where your catering license comes in. If it's on-premise, then it should be an on-premise license. That's my own way of thinking, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess Mr. Marsh does raise an interesting question. So if we had if we taking a restaurant right now that doesn't serve alcohol, I suppose, could they apply for this license and then cater special events?
As any restaurant like that, Jack's, there are a number of others in town could qualify under this regime here.
Of course, their restaurant would have to be shut down to ordinary, you know, off-the-street type traffic for the event, I would assume.
They would, in order to be able to serve alcohol even on premise under this ordinance, you still have to obtain a special use permit, or special event permit rather, which requires the set out the area where alcohol is going to be sold and make provisions for minors not having access. So they would have to comply with those regulations as well.
Okay.
I have another question on that.
Sure.
Also, now, I'm not quite sure how this works, but, okay, if she gets so many days per month, or the caterer gets so many days per month, and they're not obliged to do the special event permit, I take it with this, is there some way that the local police department is notified that an event is going on so they can monitor it?
Mr. President, under this ordinance, as we've drafted it, anytime alcohol was intended to be sold or was going to be made available to the public, the caterer would have to obtain a special event permit, whether that's on premises or off premises. That's the means that we have to.
Okay, thank you.
So the police have the ability to regulate that.
Anybody else wish to comment?
Mr. President and Commissioners, I'm Tracy Tews with TH Investments, representing Liquor Warehouse and Southview Liquors. I guess I only have a question. In 48.08.060, does it limit the amount of licenses any corporation can hold within the city of Dickinson?
Give me those numbers again, 48 what?
It's 48.08.060.
Oh, okay.
Mr. President, the limitation on the number of licenses that any one person or entity can hold is in 4.08.120. And the limitation that we've established as a city is 2. You can have 2 licenses at any one time.
Can you say that again, Mr. Colling? I didn't quite hear you.
The section is 4.08.120. It is not reproduced in your packet tonight.
It's not here.
No,
okay.
it's not a change that we were making in this ordinance that you would adopt today. That's an existing part of our code.
Okay. And so, do you know what it says?
The limitation is 2. You have 2 licenses.
Limited to 2. Okay.
2 for any corporation or entity, or is it just
For any entity.
any? Okay, and then, I'm not finding the statute in which you're changing in any of it that says that the license would be at a limitation of 100,000.
Best of my knowledge, that's not in the ordinance. I don't recall anything on that. We did have several versions of the ordinance talking about allocating the ordinance in different manners, and that $100,000 figure may have appeared in that. It is not in the commission's packet tonight or the ordinance that we're considering.
Mr. Colling, in that regards, the existing ordinance as it exists today, it doesn't refer to a license being $100,000, does it?
No, it does not.
So that's not existing law?
No.
Okay. I think the references to $100,000 or any figure close to that is just individual opinion of what we think the market value, present market value of an ordinance is. And that you really don't know until a transaction takes place.
And I guess lastly, my last question is it goes into some fair bidding practice rules such as general construction or other state century codes go into, but it has kind of a bold statement in there that it says that the city reserves the right to reject any and all bids or to waive any informalities in the bidding process received, and it leaves the sole judgment up to the city commission in the best interest. What are the rules of the best interest? What's the best interest? Kind of opens a broad door there.
What time is it, huh?
Pardon me?
It just depends what time it is, what day.
No.
That's a broad door.
No. Mr. Colling, can you comment on that?
Oh, yes, Mr. President, that's language that I've drafted. We know that things can happen, and the bidding process may not go as exactly as we intend. There may be informalities that occur in the process, and that provision is intended so that the commission has some discretion in how you go about the process. We've laid out the way we think it's going to work, but there may be other factors that come into play, and you'll have to weigh those at that time to decide whether or not you wish to waive informalities within the process. That is fairly typical language that I have included in other bidding statutes or other bidding rules that I have drafted, and I would be my recommendation and encouragement that the city retain that language.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make one more comment on that, I guess it would be, as a liquor store owner, I would like to see what constitutes a fair bid. Is it dollar, years of service? Is it education on business management? What constitutes a fair bid of running a liquor store? Is it $25? Is it years in business? What is it? It's rather different in a DOT specification that Mr. Jackson has written before. When he's an engineer, he can has the right to reject or refuse all bids based on his knowledge of an engineer. is it Mr. Jackson's knowledge of running a liquor store that we're rejecting it on, or Mr. Johnson's?
Mr. Tooze, that isn't the way I would understand this process, that once you're bidding, I think the bidding process is really a dollar process.
Okay.
Now, prior to that, you know, to be qualified as a bidder, you have to submit an application, and I think where some of your questions would come in is what does it take to be a qualified applicant? And at this point, I don't think the city has tried to develop an application form specific to this process. And just, you know, what the metrics would be in that application form to determine whether or not you're a qualified bidder. Mr. Colling or Mr. Kessel, did you have some specifics in mind at this point?
President Johnson, Commission, we do have within our ordinances, you make specific mention to the application process, and that certainly was our intent, is that it would be used to then apply the information provided to the curtain ordinance to make sure that they are of suitable character as defined by our ordinance. That's how that application process was used. Anything beyond that, I think it's difficult to tell how this would be implemented in the future. But in terms of staff's input, that would be what we would be looking for, is applying the current ordinance to the application procedure like we do any other liquor license establishment.
So if someone, you know, is going to build a restaurant and wants to apply for the restaurant liquor license, they do fill out an application, answer some fairly basic questions. Is that kind of the application process you have in mind?
That is. They submit to a background check from the police department to make sure there's no felonies or alcohol-related issues that may preclude them from being a liquor license operator.
Okay. I think that's kind of what they'd have in mind there. I don't think you're going to, you know, try to decide if someone is a better business person or not qualified as a better business person, that kind of thing.
I believe that's why the City Commission is choosing a bid process rather than an RFP process. The RFP process would have taken into account things of that nature, where a bid process as proposed is more based on highest bidder, as has been stated earlier. So I think this is more
more objective.
Yeah, that's a good word, thank you.
Otherwise, you get into a subjective situation.
Would this commission consider a change in this code of 46.08.021 on up in the limitation from 2?
Oh, okay, now, you're not referring to the,
I'm referring to the one Mr. Colling's referring to.
Where, so would we consider the limit of 2 increasing 2 to something else?
Yes.
And what's your proposal?
Unlimited.
Would you match that by putting an unlimited number in the number of licenses issued?
If you're opening it up to a bid process, yes. But that's not my decision, that's yours.
Well, you might want to think about your answer there. If you go, if you're saying you favor unlimited, then we would treat on-off sale licenses just like restaurant licenses, and we would just put a number on it, and anybody can have them. We wouldn't limit them to 16, and we wouldn't worry about whether our population's 18,000 people or 21, or is that what you're advocating?
Nope, that's not what I'm advocating,
I think
because
I think that's,
if you're unlimiting it, you're still going to be the deciding factor at this board of, through a bid process of what, unless we're throwing the whole ordinance out.
Wouldn't be a bidding process then.
Would just be open door?
It'd be just open door.
No,
Wouldn't
I'm
need
not
it.
in favor of an open door.
Well, there are a lot of people in this town that think there should be that way, and then the strongest survive.
It's no different than the banking industry. You have to write a charter to become a bank.
I think that if we're going to limit on-off sale licenses to 16, I think it is, I can't imagine that, I'll rephrase that, I think that some limitation on the number of licenses a single entity can have would be in order, and the two seems to be working. 16 isn't very many.
Mr. Chairman and Board. It limits us in the fact that there was a license that became available about a year and a half ago that we were interested in becoming partners in, and we could not do that.
But you had two at that time, though, right?
Yes, we still have to it. So it does limit, there's stores for sale, there's bars for sale. And I'm not speaking entirely for our corporation, but we may have an interest of growing our corporation. And our corporation is owning liquor stores.
What's the title of that section that he's referring to, that .120?
4.08.120.
Yeah, what's the title of the section that we're dealing with?
Number per person is the section heading on
Oh,
it.
is that that's the formal title of the section of the code?
That's the section of the alcohol ordinance. that
Alcohol.
covers.
okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? Anybody else? Okay, we'll declare the public hearing closed. It's my intention to ask Mr. Kessel to put this on 2 weeks from now as another public hearing. The staff has indicated they wanted to do a little more research regarding the catering issue. But we'll certainly take, did I miss something? Oh. We'll take, but we'll have another hearing that's, and allow people further comment on this. But thank you for your participation, and we thank you for your patience. We know that it's been a long process, but there have been a lot of issues introduced here in the process. So,
Mr. President?
Mr. Lamblum.
I'd like to add one more curve to your discussion here, though, is that there's nothing within the proposed ordinance that deals with a minimum bid. And if you recall, a couple of months ago, I was an advocate of the third alternative that basically would increase the amount or the price for a license, to 6 digits. But it obviously was not reasonable and was not practical at that point. But as I keep reading through this thing, I just wondering if it's not practical, though, to look at developing a minimum bid within the process. This way that the city would gain an advantage, but that value of that particular license would not escalate over a 1-year period to large and investment concerns. From that standpoint, that if your minimum bid was, or the way it is now, we're proposing if somebody came in with a $10,000 bid within a year, that value of that particular license could be $120,000. And I believe that the city is probably the one that would come out in the short end of that. And that's why I'm considering, or would consider a proposal to look at a minimum bid within this process. It would not jeopardize the existing licenses and it does not necessarily create undue competition in any other manner. And those that bid would understand, there is a minimum basis.
Mr. Colling, is there anything in this ordinance right now, proposed ordinance, that would prevent a commission from, either by resolution or motion, as part of the process, establish a minimum bid amount?
No, there's not, Mr. President. You could do that at the time that you decide to issue another on-off sale license. To point out in the ordinance, it does not require you to issue an on-off sale license at this time. It doesn't require you to do that once the census numbers come in over 18,000. That is still at your discretion, and you can add that license or choose not to add that license whenever you choose to do so.
That's under the existing ordinance as it is today, plus as this is proposed. Anytime somebody, in a sense, buys an existing business, they're taking a risk. I mean, they're going to pay a value for that liquor license. They could be buying real estate, they could be buying inventory, and then they're buying that license, and that's a market value. And I think they have a risk of it going both ways, Commissioner Landblum. I mean, they could buy at the top of the market, and when it's time for them to sell, they could be selling at the bottom of the market. So if they, in a sense, paid $150,000 for a license at one time, 5-10 years later, that same license may sell for significantly less, and that has a lot to do with just what the local economic conditions are like, what our population is, that type of thing. So, I think the commission has a lot of discretion here. I don't know that you have to write in a minimum amount into the ordinance. As Mr. Colling said, we can establish that we feel it's needed. We can establish that by resolution or motion for the particular license that we may be granting. But at the same time, I kind of think if we think this is a market thing, then the market is what the market is. If somebody, if there's only one bidder and that bidder's $10,000, well, then I guess that's the market at the time.
Well, the other alternative would be to add another item to the list of 11 that would say that the city commission may require a minimum bid. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to, nor do we have to set an amount.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I think we, as Mr. Colling said, we have that, but if you want to be very explicit about it, I'm certain he can find a way to.
I guess that's the reason, that would be the rationale from my standpoint, is just to get it into a written form, since we're redoing a lot of the laws or the rules on this thing. And if we put that opportunity in there, and we can do it by resolution or any other method down the road, but at least we have that, we have stated that as being an option, and that anybody is coming into bid would understand that.
I don't have any objections there to that. I did have a very minor question, and that was under lodge or club licenses. You're saying as of December 31st, there are 2 lodge licenses. I thought we talked about this. I thought there are 3.
I'll recheck that and make sure we get the correct number in there.
Okay.
Commissioners, there's the Eagles, there's the Elks, and there's St. A's.
We think, yeah, I think there's
St.
3.
Anthony's,
but,
Eagles, and,
but we'll make
I'll
sure
get that correct.
we've got that correct. So, okay. Well, there'll be opportunity again. We'll have this on for another public hearing next time. So. Okay, well, we have a 6:10 public hearing, and Mr. Soren, are you introducing this one?
Yes, President Johnson and Commissioners. We did receive a request from Mr. Kostlecki to rezone Lot 1, Block 7 of Prairie Hills 4th from R2 to R3. This lot is located just south of 15th Street West along the drainage ditch. It is a large lot in the area. His intentions with this property is to build multifamily housing on it. Most of the, or there is a lot of current multifamily property west of this property. East of it is a drainage ditch. South of it is the interstate. It's also zoned R3 east of this property as well. And planning and zoning and looking at this is recommending the rezoning from R2 to R3.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Soren. At this time, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anybody that wishes to comment regarding this proposed ordinance may do so. Just step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment, so we'll declare the public hearing closed and invite any comments from city commissioners or city staff. This would be ordinance number what, Mr. Coley?
The ordinance 1405.
1405. Would there be a motion regarding first, let me point out something. In your, the ordinance in your book, there's, under section 1, there's an extra and R-2 in there. That's a typo. You could cross that out. And in that same section, there's numerical number 1, and under following residential high density, there's a colon and then a period. The period, I think, would be removed. So,
Mr. President, I'll move for the passage of first reading ordinance 1405.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go back to tab 4, under general issues. We have item G, North Industries Development Agreement. Who is presenting that? Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson, Commissioners. As you know, the North Industries is a plat that was recently annexed into the city of Dickinson. As a condition of that, the development agreement was part of that. This is the first attempt to achieve that goal. This development agreement, in particular, has been discussed with the owners of North Industries. They are amenable to this agreement as it is before you. I just wanted to point out a few things that are contained within. The first I have mentioned already, the approval of the plat. The second is infrastructure improvement. There are references, of course, to the city code, and the intent here is, the most important part in many ways is actually section 6, assurance of infrastructure completion. And we've been talking about this what seems like for quite some time. And what this section tries to do is provide some kind of financial assurance in 3 different methods, that being a certified check, excuse me, a performance bond, or simply a certificate of deposit, or CD, an amount of 35% of the projected construction costs related to infrastructure. That amount, that assurance, is provided by the developer to make sure that if the project isn't completed, that those funds would be used to complete that portion of the project. It is a number that was achieved by reviewing development agreements in other communities, most specifically Bismarck and Fargo. And we believe that it at least provides the city of Dickinson with some dollars that where we could, if issued, if need be, and it really is a measure of safety. It's something we hope to never draw upon, but but if it's there, it could be drawn upon to complete the infrastructure requirements. I think, in essence, this is because this is the first time that I'm aware of that the City of Dickinson has developed a development agreement such as this, it breaks new ground in several different ways. And so you've had an opportunity to review it, and I guess I can respond to any further questions. I can tell you, Engineer Soren, myself, Attorney Coling, and the owners spent a great deal of time trying to come up with a document that is amenable to both parties. So with that, I'll try to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Comments or questions here?
Yeah, I've got the 35%, is that really enough?
Commissioner Landblum, that's the question that we knew would be asked, and I don't know. I think enough is as a matter of what you're comfortable with. You could easily, we're riding that fence between discouraging development and encouraging development, and where you fall in between is a subjective call. I don't want to be quoted on this, but one city, large city, did 30%, one large city did 40%. Are we comfortable with that, considering the boom bust cycles we've gone through? Maybe not. But it is a number that we felt comfortable enough proposing to you, and it's a debate that maybe you as commissioners should have.
Also, at what point do we release the bond or the CD or the check?
The intent originally is that 35% would be provided based on phases. So if a project once was proposed, they'd provide 35% guarantee on the first phase of a project. The release of those dollars, depending on if there's a second phase or if they intend to transition right into that, you could simply apply that financial assurance to phase 2, assuming they fall right into it after phase 1 is complete. So I'm not sure that if that answers the question you're trying to ask.
It gives a different scenario, but just wondering at what point do we say, before you move on to your next phase, we have to see so much completion or et cetera. And also, how does this relate to the development fund or the impact fund that we've set up, and where does that fit in when we release those?
The impact fee program really is not impacted. They still can apply for those funds as they would, as any developer would be able to. Those impact fee program allows $600,000 in industrial or commercial areas, and that's an up to limit or halfway, whichever is met first. So the impact fee program still applies in these areas. In terms of when, I suppose, substantial completion of the infrastructure, if we're satisfied that 80% is done, we can probably release 15% of the dollars that we've retained and keep 20.
As determined by the city, then?
Correct.
Other comments or questions?
I think that Mr. Kessel's done a good job of summarizing where we are on this, and to back up, I think we've had a lot of evolution on this over the last 6 months, leading to what we see before us tonight. I agree. It's really subjective. It's going to be a judgment call on our part. All we're trying to do is to make sure that a developer, and we have to have this conversation, not putting names on this, but that any developer does in fact complete the infrastructure that's needed in a subdivision. I do have a little concern about, I think I heard you say that this would be done by phases, that the dollar amounts would be done by phases. I do have a little concern about that. The agreement at the end of number 6 does make it very clear how long we'll hold that security. But we have a number of examples around town around the edge of town, where developments were done and infrastructure not completed. And that's what we're trying to prevent here. I want to go further and say that while I think an argument can be made that a requirement like this should be put on every subdivision, I think there's really a different risk, if you will, for the city, depending on the nature of the subdivision. And I'm not sure it is needed for every subdivision. Some will see that as an inconsistency, and it's something we probably need to talk about in the future. Some subdivisions, by their nature, are simply not going to happen without the construction of the infrastructure that we're contemplating. But we can talk about that, I guess, as time goes by. I think this is a good start. It's a fair start.
The 35%, is, I think, significant enough that there's enough skin in the game on the part of the developer that if they don't complete, it's a painful loss, and that's really what I think you're trying to shoot for. The higher the number, the more painful, but as you pointed out, you cross a line where you actually discourage your developers, and so I think this is a reasonable number for this particular project, and I can support it.
Did this developer, what was the understanding? That the 35% would be applied to how much of the development? Was it all?
Phase 1. They do have a phasing plan on this development. Without giving a whole lot away in terms of numbers, it's fairly significant. Phase 1 infrastructure is in the millions of dollars, so it would apply to that portion.
But just so we all understand then what we're really doing, we may be requiring 35% of a phase that may end up being 10 or 15% of the entire project.
Yeah, when you look at in this particular case, I'm not sure if I can put a percentage on it, maybe Engineer Soren can, but I would say it's at least a third of the total infrastructure in North Industries, maybe even approaching a half.
This first phase, you're saying?
Yeah. Engineer Soren, maybe you can, do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree that it's probably over a third of the infrastructure required.
Which would mean then it's about 12 or 15% of the total.
Sure.
So it's really, in my opinion, pretty modest, pretty reasonable.
I would have a concern if the first phase, if you were saying like the first phase is, 5% of the property. But when you're talking about somewhere between a third or and a half of the property, then I think, the development agreement will do its job. We'll get that much infrastructure put in, and if you have this phased properly, it's an orderly development. So if economic conditions change abruptly here, it's not a hit and miss type development, I'm assuming. You've got an orderly phasing plan here.
President Johnson, I believe the plan that they put forth is a very good plan, and developing the property along Highway 22 and moving east. The infrastructure that they are proposing, I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say it's probably closer to 50% than the 33% to get this phase 1 done, just because of the layout of the land and where infrastructure has to go and how to tie it all together. So I think it's a pretty substantial investment for them on the first phase to get this project underway.
Where are we sitting with the tentative timeline for delivering the city service to that subdivision, as far as lift station and on that east side there. Is that part of the whole scheme?
It is. We're in discussions with the developer on that part as well, as we're moving forward with the design of their infrastructure.
Are we going to be able to stay ahead of their development so it's in place?
We're working with them to include it with theirs.
Okay. Do we have
So it would be at the same timeline.
Do you have a proposed time frame that we're dealing with? 5 months, 6 months, less?
Well, I believe by the end of next summer is our target for completion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion here? And, Mr. Kessel, what you're looking for tonight is approval of this agreement.
That'd be correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? Would there be a motion then regarding the request?
I'll move we approve the agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go to tab 6, Public Works Engineering. Mr. Soren?
Thank you, President Johnson. I do have a final plat in front of you tonight for the Shetler subdivision. This is a subdivision located approximately 1.5 miles south of Dickinson, just off of Highway 22. It is a one-lot, just over 10-acre subdivision, expected to be an agricultural property where the developer is planning to build his single-family home on this parcel. Planning and Zoning has reviewed this and is recommending approval of this plat to the City Commission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soren. You've heard his report. Are there any comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since I'm a city's rep on the county zoning board, I just want to report that there's kind of a new review being done by the county on spot zoning or outlots. And this particular request here represents a outlot that probably would probably be contrary to where the county wanted to be going now these days. I would discourage the approval of this one just based on the fact that it's spot zoning.
Mr. Soren, you have a county commissioner on planning and zoning. Was the county commissioner present when this issue was discussed?
Yes, he was. One of the issues that was talked about that the county had was access to it. There's the 50-foot wide access easement that gets to this lot off of the section line road. The developer did talk with the county to ensure that where that access met the section line was adequate for sight distance, and they were okay with that. And there was no concerns brought to planning and zoning from county regarding the subdivision beyond that.
Mr.
President.
Mr. Jackson.
I was present at the meeting also, and, there wasn't much discussion. There was some discussion on some technical aspects of the plat that have been fixed. I think as a community, city or county, we do have more discussion and more work to do on issues like this. I think if this were in a high-growth area of the city, an area of the city that, we referred to as an urban growth area, I'd be more concerned. I'd want more master planning, more ghost platting, perhaps, those kinds of things. This, I don't think, is in one of those areas. That doesn't mean that we don't need to do more work, I think, in establishing policy regarding this. I think some of the staff has concerns. But I think we're okay with this particular piece of ground for the time being.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Other comments? Mr. Colleen, this is resolution number what?
Be Resolution 41-2010, 41.
41. All right. There's no other discussion. Is there a motion regarding this resolution?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, in lieu of seconding this motion, I'd like to be able to table this until all 5 members are available next time, because I'm not going to second this particular motion.
Okay. Mr. Colleen, I know I can surrender the gavel. There's a process for doing that. I'm prepared to second the motion. Can you tell me how I surrender the gavel here?
No particular procedure to it, you just need to hand it over to Mr. Jackson.
Well, if you give it to me, I don't have to recognize him.
Mr. Jackson, I think, is the vice chairman, so, Mr. Jackson, I'm prepared to second the motion. I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second.
Right. I think you get to call the vote.
Do I get to call the vote?
You may call for the vote.
Any more discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Johnson,
Vote yes.
Mr. Landblum,
No.
and I will vote yes. And I'm going to give the gavel back.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. That motion did carry then. Mr. Soren, you have other reports?
Just the planning and zoning minutes are in there for your review. If there's any questions regarding those, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Okay, any questions for the engineer? Well, hearing
You know,
none. Oh, go ahead.
I'll maybe use this part of the agenda to make a comment. I think at planning and zoning, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're anticipating a little bit of lull with new subdivisions. There are a couple of things going through, but nothing very significant right now. I have a hunch, though, that lull isn't going to last very long. And it's just a matter of time before we see more major subdivisions. I think as a city, we need to pose the question, is there some point in time that we think we have enough lots platted? If the answer to that question is no, then we don't need much more discussion. But if we answer it yes, that there will come a point in time that we shouldn't approve any more subdivisions, then now, during this lull, would be the time to contemplate that question. And if we want to give that charge to planning and zoning and staff, that's fine. But I just think, you know, we shouldn't wait till we get another subdivision of 150 lots, or whatever it might be. And we may be fine, but I think it needs to be contemplated.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, that's something I've been wondering about, and I've even discussed a little bit with Mr. Kessel. You know, do we have enough approved at this point? And, you know, we probably need some energy industry input into this. But it seems like we have quite a few lots approved at this point.
It's a difficult question, and it may be that we feel in certain areas of town that there's room to approve more subdivisions, and that other areas of town not. And that can be driven by a lot of different things, the availability of infrastructure and things like that. But I think the answer to the question, can a community reach a point that it shouldn't approve any more plats? I think the answer to that is yes. I just don't know for sure what that point is. but I think we should look at it now so we have some basis to make decisions in the future.
Last summer, I asked for some numbers as far as occupancy and the number of empty lots, or the lots we have within subdivisions. Have we come any closer to completing that exercise?
I can't tell you how many lots are available that are currently in the zoning breakdowns that we have. No, I
I
don't
was
know.
just looking at the occupancy and the vacancy rates.
Yeah, I don't know that we have that information.
I think you have some of the information, I mean, because you know from the plats how many single-family or twin home lots have been approved.
Yeah, let me clarify. We can, using plating and building permit issuance, come to some conclusions, but we haven't married the two together yet to have
Yeah.
those conclusions.
And so I think with a little bit of work, you know, you can kind of pull those numbers together. And as Mr. Jackson's pointed out, if there is a little bit of lull, it's probably a good time to do that and for us to talk about it. So I think we would ask Mr. Kessel and Mr. Soren and to try present some information to us, and if you do have a recommendation yourselves, to also present your recommendation. And as I said, we may want to try get some energy and industry input into this too.
If I may, President Johnson, just a comment related to that. The city of Williston has been ahead of the curve, so to speak, in terms of its oil impacts on that community compared to Dickinson by about a year and a half to 2 years. One of the comments that I've heard their staff and elected officials say is we planned as best we possibly could, and it hit us really hard. And one of the reasons is, unlike maybe a typical manufacturing impact where it takes a while for the industry to locate into a community, the reference has oftentimes been made to like an automobile manufacturing. It takes at least a year just to construct the plant, much less find the staff and otherwise. The oil industry isn't like that. It hits you within 30 days. You can have a significant amount of growth in a community just based on one or two drilling platforms coming into your area. So that's certainly something that we should exercise some caution in. The other thing I would mention is that we do plan to engage a comprehensive planning process in 2011. I've not heard officially yet that the dollars have been granted from the DOT, but this certainly is a question that could be answered and be part of that process as we move forward.
We'll have the question before us before that comprehensive plan is done, I suspect.
It might be worth our while then to, and we've talked about this before, but to develop an interim policy plan as to what we consider our needs are and what direction we want to go with things. If we've seen our general commercial and industrial located in that 163 acres, where do we encourage the residential and the multifamily to develop next? And I think maybe just an interim policy so the public at least has an understanding as to what our designs are.
Thank you, Mr. Lamblum. And Mr. Jackson, any other comments? Okay, well, we'll move along then to the city administrator's report. That's tab 8.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commissioners. I was unable to attend our last commission meeting. I was at an ICMA conference. I'll report on that in a few moments. But I have had the opportunity to review at least a portion of your rather lengthy meeting in my absence. That portion that I reviewed was mostly pertaining to the annexation process, since that was a hotly debated topic. What I'd like to do is try to clear up maybe some misstatements that were made at that meeting by using the overhead today. I failed to bring my pointer, but I'll try to do my best here. What's on the screen is a post-annexation explanation of what the tax implications will be. And there's going to be a second slide up there shortly. And the one thing that I wanted to mention before we move to that slide is at the top of the page, there's a market value number. That number is $6.8 million, rounding that off. We've tried to use that same value in each side to try to make an apples-to-apples comparison. In speaking with Assessor Zent, these documents that I'm presenting were produced by her in consultation with county staff. So I believe them to be pretty accurate. One of the changes that will happen is the city staff will take over assessing these properties in the future, and Assessor Zent felt like the buildings and improvements are going to be pretty close as to what they are today. So we don't anticipate that market value to change a whole lot. The land values may change, but the most of the property improvements come from structures on top of that land. So I present that to you on the top just to say that we are trying to do an apples-to-apples comparison. What I'd like to mention then is on this page specifically is you'll notice there are some city mills included on the bottom of the page of $41,127.51. Those are the mills that will be applied to the property in the newly annexed area and anticipated that revenue gain of $41,000, bringing the total to 116. Now, if we flip the page, you'll notice that the total tax dollars is 91,632, and you might ask, well, if the city is gaining 41,000, how come 116 minus 91 doesn't equal 41,000? Well, the reason is there's a portion of the county that would, or the portion of the mills that would be lost that the county will no longer be able to charge. And the first one is weed control. It represents 4 mills or $1,361.50. That is a revenue loss to the county, but the city does have a contract with the county right now to spray weeds within the city limits. So my assumption is that part of those dollars at least will be returned to the county for work that they'll continue to do in that area. The next is library. It's the same amount of mills and the same amount of dollars. That right now is a pass-through account, and those dollars, as I understand it, are provided to our city library to operate a bookmobile. So in essence, very little would change in that regard. The next item is roads, and this represents about 25 mills to the county, or almost $8,700. This is a loss of revenue to the county, and a fairly significant one. But I'd also like to point out that the maintenance responsibilities of these roads are no longer the county's, and they will become the city's. So there is a drop in revenue, but there's also a commensurate drop in expenses. And some people would say the expenses of maintaining that area are actually higher than that. A lot will depend on this winter's weather. The next item then is fire, and that represents 13 mills or $4,400. You will have a automatic aid agreement likely at your next commission meeting that we'd like to present that will make the rural fire department whole, so to speak. Until we can have infrastructure in the annexed area that includes hydrants, that allows our current fire department to access those hydrants, we'd like to make the rural fire department whole by providing them the same level of financial support that they're getting today. Now, I will mention that these changes take effect in 2011 for payment in 2012. So we have about a year before the transition from this standpoint takes place. I believe a specific comment was made that the county would be out $90,000 in revenue. The county doesn't receive $90,000 in revenue specifically from that annex area now. There's $91,000 in revenue, but 41 of it is for the school system. So the county gets about, round numbers, about $50,000 total. Of that 50, they would be unable to collect about 16, but that's the numbers that I just walked you through. The weed control, the library, the roads, and the fire. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all clear on what the tax implications of the annexation area are. The other tax implication is sales tax. There is a requirement that anybody collecting city sales tax, or collecting sales tax, would have to also collect city sales tax in that area. April 1st, I believe, is the first time that they would have to charge city sales tax, and that would be in 2011. I have been contacted by the state tax department, and we have walked through notification of the businesses in that area. So that should happen yet this year for implementation in April of next year. Are there any questions regarding the tax implications of the annexation?
You know, only one. It's unfortunate that a wrong number got out there. Are we communicating with the county? Are we sure that the county is understanding this the same way that we are, and that everybody is in step with understanding these numbers?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Assessor Zant put this together in concert with county staff members.
I'm talking specifically about county commission.
Oh, I have been in communication with some county commissioners, but not all, and that is probably one part of this process. If we could go back and repeat, I would wish we could, and that is to present formally at the county commission. That did not happen. I did apologize to the chair of the county commissioner for that just this week, or last week.
Would it serve any purpose for you to make a visit next Tuesday to their meeting, just to explain what you've done for us too?
We certainly can do that.
As a gesture?
Mm-hmm. Any other commissions related to, or any questions related to this portion of my presentation? The next then is a letter of support for Great Lakes Airlines. Essential Air Service went to bid. Great Lakes Airlines is trying to retain the bid for Essential Air Service. They have increased the amount of flights that will enter and exit the city of Dickinson. As I understand it, the Airport Authority is supportive of the new bid from Great Lakes Airlines and asked for letters of support to be sent to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So what you have before you then is that letter and the material provided by the Airport Authority requesting that letter of support. The next item then is one that we hope that you'll take action on at a future commission meeting, and that is an ongoing agreement with the U.S. Department of Interior as it relates to the operation and maintenance of the Baskill Gates at the Dickinson Dam. This particular contract has been in existence, I believe, since the 60s. The only thing that's changed really is the amount of remuneration that occurs. Right now, it's about just under $30,500. The work plan is similar in most respects as it has been in the past. So I'm reporting on it this evening in anticipation that it'll appear on your agenda for a vote at the next meeting. The next item then is a copy of a draft of the Stark County Comprehensive Plan. Roosevelt Custer's been engaged to develop a comprehensive plan for them. They are in the data gathering, or excuse me, in the comment gathering stage. They would like to have entities review the document and provide comment directly to Mr. Gene Burrish. His number is provided. I believe this document has also been provided or will be provided to our Planning and Zoning Commission as well for their input and comment. So I certainly wasn't going to go through it at all. I just wanted to make sure that you as commissioners were aware, and if you wanted to provide specific comment, you could do so to Mr. Burrish.
Just as an added note, if I may, there will be a working session with the County Planning and Zoning Commission next Monday at 3 o'clock, if anybody's interested in participating in that.
The next couple items that I have are not on the agenda, but they are for your update. As I mentioned earlier, I did attend the ICMA annual conference. ICMA stands for International City County Managers Association. It was an excellent conference. I enjoy attending those because of the great amount of information that you can gain. Now, having said that, I will say that this year's conference, there was a great deal of presentations and sessions on how to deal with a downturned economy. We have been very lucky in the city of Dickinson that the downturns that the rest of the nation, for the most part, have seen, we've been insulated from. So it did allow me to attend some sessions that normally I wouldn't be able to attend. I did attend one on citizen survey basics, on using surveys to improve performance, some things on how to hire the best and avoid hiring nightmares, what your libraries can do, transforming government through strategy or strategic operational reviews, and some things on revenue enhancement. So it's always a learning session for me. I appreciate being able to attend, and I thank the Commission for continuing to allow me to attend that conference. The next item I wanted to bring up is on November 19th, the transit building that we've spoke about many times at this Commission will be bid again. This is the second time it will be bid. The first time bids came in 25% or so over budget. They are hoping that that will be much different this time. I have distributed some information for you. It does include some drawings and also they call them options in the state DOT process, and you'll notice there's 5 different options that will be bid. Their rules state that they have to award the bid within 24 hours of the bid opening. So I do plan to attend the bid opening in order to make sure that each of those options is considered for award. So I'll certainly update the City Commission as soon as, if that award happens or not. And then the last thing that I'd like to mention is tomorrow is Election Day, and we'll be making some important decisions, so just wanted to remind everybody of that date. And that would conclude my report unless there's any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions for the city administrator?
Yeah, what's the status of the planner and the public works director search?
Thank you for asking that question. The planner candidate that we did bring up recently, we have decided against making an offer to that individual. I've actually been in contact with our initial candidate who initially turned down the position, hoping to entice her to reconsider. The Public Works Director position, we also brought a candidate up and decided not to offer in that regard as well. And we are looking at doing some internal staff changes to cover those duties and maybe allow us to hire at a different level than at the director level of the organization. Maybe allow us to hire at a manager level instead, believing that it would be easier to find that level of staff than it is a director level of staff. So, thank you for the question.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to accounts payable and payroll. Are there any of the accounts payable you wish to discuss or have questions about?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second that.
We have the motion and the second. We'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Then I indicated I do have a report from a city commissioner's perspective. Mr. Kessel and I were invited by Missouri Basin Well Service to attend a meeting in Watford City. And what Missouri Basin did was they sponsored a trip for a half dozen or so of our legislative leadership to show them firsthand some of the impact of the energy industry in western North Dakota. So I think they took them to, or they started out in Bismarck with a presentation by Lynn Helms, went on to Stanley, saw what's going on there, met with local leaders at Stanley, then went to Williston, did the same thing there, down to Watford City, and I know they met there with McKenzie County and Watford City officials, and then Mr. Kessel and I had a chance to tell them about some of the impact that is going on in Dickinson. And as part of that, we presented them just a memo to kind of summarize the impact, and I just brought that along to share with you now. And maybe you can pass this down to Mr. Soren and Ms. Binstock. I think it sounded like the meetings had gone well, that the legislators heard a pretty consistent story from Stanley, Williston, Watford City, and Dickinson, that there's been quite a bit of impact here, whether you're talking about housing or crime or the schools, just a pretty consistent story. And, you know, I think it was a good meeting for us to be there. Dickinson has, in a sense, received, for lack of a better term, some block funding. You may recall that we received our oil formula money, and then on top of that, last year and this year, we got a fixed amount of $500,000. If I understand this properly, I think Williston received $1 million. And I think there's going to be some support amongst the leadership that they will do something again for Dickinson, or at least consider it for Dickinson and Williston, because we're the two hub cities here in western North Dakota when it comes to oil, and we're also the cities that really supply most of the workforce to the oil industry, and they realize the impacts from that. And I think it may require that some city staff and perhaps some of our city commissioners will go to Bismarck and testify in front of various committees where we'll make a case for a much larger block grant next time than the $500,000. See that we have the impact here is a growing impact, and financially is becoming quite significant. So, but I think it was a good trip for the legislators. I think especially those in leadership that come from the eastern part of the state, they had an opportunity to really learn more about the oil impact here, whether it's in our smaller communities or our larger communities in western North Dakota. So, anything you'd add to that, Mr. Kessel?
I'd just like to say that President Johnson provided the presentation on behalf of the City of Dickinson and did a very able job, and that one of the areas of impact he didn't mention specifically was roads, and that's one that every county commission that we've heard from, and city for that matter, has been impacted by. And unfortunately, we had additional deaths on Highway 22 very close to the City of Dickinson, and that's one area of safety that we'd all like to see improved.
Yeah, I should say too that we did have two Stark County commissioners there, and they also had an opportunity to speak, as well as Dunn County had a commissioner there. So I think again it was time well spent. And that concludes my report. Are there any comments by other city commissioners? If not, is there anybody from the public that would like to address the commission? If so, step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. No one from the public. Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.